Welcome everybody to the Vintage Japanese Motorcycle Restoration channel, or VJM Moto Resto. I'm already part way through a restoration of a Japanese motorcycle, vintage Japanese motorcycle at the moment. The frame is away for powder coating, and I've already made a start on some of the other parts that need refurbishing before we can start reassembly. So without further ado, let's get on and I'll show you what I'm doing. This is the engine from the project bike. It's a single cylinder 4-stroke Yamaha engine, and I haven't had to rebuild this at all. It's basically as I got it, although I have sprayed the cases themselves. The bike was running when I got it, and I have been able to road test it, and the bike worked perfectly, pulled through all the gears, no problems at all, clutch worked. So I've basically not had to do anything with this apart from check it over. The top end is obviously off, and I'll show you some of those components and what I've done to those shortly. These components may give you a better idea of the bike I'm working on. So if we take a look at some of these, start with the carbs. So these carburetors, it's a single cylinder, but we've got twin carbs, and these have been completely stripped, ultrasonically cleaned, put back together, set to factory specs. I do my own zinc plating as well, so things like the top of this carb, these plates, the throttle cable assemblies here, these have all been zinc plated, and then these ones will be gold passivated or yellow passivated. These ones are bright metal, same with this one as well. So I do zinc plate all my own parts if they need it. Not all the parts need it, but some of them do. So that's our carburetor assembly ready to go back on. This bike is slightly unusual in that it's got a separate oil tank, so it's not a wet sump bike, it's a dry sump bike, and we've got the two halves of, if I can get them the right way around, there we go. So we've got the two halves of our oil tank there, so that needs putting back together. We've got our head assembly, so twin exhaust ports, twin inlet ports, got those the wrong way around. This has had the valves taken out, reground, put back in and lapped in. Everything checked on there to make sure it's all within tolerance, and then the whole thing's been blasted. I do have a blast cabinet, a small one, which I'm sure at some point I'll do a video on. The barrel and the piston were absolutely fine. The bike hasn't done a lot of miles, so I don't know if you can see in there, but it's actually covered in grease at the moment, but the hone marks are still in that, so nothing to do on that. The piston itself has all been cleaned up. Gudgeon pin, it's got a few marks on it, but there's no ridges in there, so as far as I'm concerned, that's going back in. No real marks at all on the piston, that all looks good, so that's all going back in as is. As well, oil cooler pipes, and again I've zinc plated these as well. I may change this one, I didn't realise when I'd done it, but that's not looking very clever, so that might need redoing. And then we've got the rocker cover as well, and again all of these slight marks, but basically unworn, so really happy with that. I've also got around to doing the swinging arm at this stage, and it's basically aluminium spray paint. It's a steel swinging arm. It's not aluminium or anything else exotic. So this has basically been rubbed down, resprayed. All the welds have been checked to make sure there's no issues. The pivot and the shaft and everything has all been out. Bearings are all okay, so they've all gone back in, all re-greased. So that's ready to go back on the bike. So here's another box of parts that I've already refurbished at this point in time. So I was lucky that the fork stanchions are there's no pitching on these, they're nice and straight. So all I've done here is I've actually polished up the aluminium. I don't want to go for a completely mirror finish on these. What I'm looking for is something close to factory. I think actually these are probably slightly shinier than factory now, but they'll dull down slightly anyway, I'm sure. Fork seals, when I got the bike, paperwork that came with it said they'd been done about 12 months earlier, and they seem absolutely fine. So they're all sorted. They're ready to go back on. And then I've got various Tupperwares. Obviously I have a lot of takeaways. And again, these are bolts. I always tend to try and keep bolts together for their particular use. So these are bolts that have come out of the frame. These particular ones are all been zinced and then put through the black passivate to get as close as possible really to the original finish they would have had on the bike when it came out of the factory. That's really what I'm aiming for, is to try and make the bike look as though it's sort of just left the factory. I don't want it to look any better than left the factory, but you know, that's basically what I'm aiming for. A few other bits and pieces here, cam chain tensioner. Can't quite remember where that's off yet. These are the little plastic, or sorry, rubber bits that sit in the fins on the engine just to stop it vibrating. I think that's what they're for. That's the tacho drive. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you get the idea. There's a few polished up bits there. Headlight brackets. They're off the. They're for the. Oh, this one actually. This and those are both for valve adjustment. So you get to the valve adjusters. Yeah, there's a few other boxes that I've got in there where these are just things that I've basically gone through and re-zinced, ready to go back on the bike. Engine mountings, I think, that type of thing. So I haven't so far done anything else major on the bike. So the frame is currently away, being powder coated. Should be picking that up hopefully end of next week, and then we can start reassembling if I've managed to get other bits and pieces done that I need to do. If I just move the camera over this way, up there, you can see the wheels. So this will perhaps give you a better idea. I'm sure some of you already worked out what bike this might be by now. The wheels themselves, actually, as it happens, are in pretty good condition. I don't think they're going to need repainting. I think they're just going to need the alloy cleaning up and polishing. The paint itself doesn't seem to be peeling or corroded. I think it just needs a good wash off, to be honest. Discs are in good condition. I'll show you those in a minute because I'm working on those at the minute. And I'll show you some of the other parts that I've yet to start working on. So these 4 boxes here contain pretty much the rest of the parts off the bike. Bits that I haven't done yet. So I tend to work to a system where I have all the parts separated into boxes, hopefully into logical categories. And then what I do is I just start working my way through them. If I've stripped it to the frame, then I start with the cycle parts. Well, actually, that's not true. If I've got an engine which needs work, I tend to work on the engine first, because if I'm going to end up writing the thing off because the engine's no good, there's no point spending money on doing all the rest of the parts. So engine first, get the engine sorted. Once that's done, then move on to the cycle parts. In this case, because I mentioned earlier the engine, bottom end of the engine was absolutely fine, I've rebuilt the top end of the engine. I will be rebuilding that soon. I know that's okay. So basically I've moved on to the cycle parts, frames away, that'll be back soon. So I'm now working on the parts that are necessary to get me back to a rolling chassis, and then I can start working on the other components. So let's have a look at some of the parts that I've got in these boxes. So in this box, what have we got? We've obviously got the chain, steering stem yokes. We've also got the top yoke there, or triple T, if you happen to be in America. We've got all of the steering, the ball bearings. This bike had ball bearings on it. The races look okay. I may reuse them. I probably should have decided before the bike went away for powder coating, to be perfectly honest. Indicator assemblies are in this one. Handlebars are in here. Another clue as to what the bike might be, which I'll reveal at the end. Bike comes with clip-ons. Okay, they're standard clip-ons. Now this one's interesting because when I took it off, it's the left-hand one. I don't know if you can see that, but basically, I think at some point this has either been, well, it's been severely bent, definitely, looking at that. But I mean, the whole thing is actually bent. It didn't feel like it was bent when I was riding it, but I think this has been re-welded at some point. I may have to look for a new one of those. I'll work on that one. I'll see what's available, see how much they cost. I don't do any of this to make money. This is purely a hobby. I like to do them up. That's the real enjoyment. That's my passion, is doing the things up, getting them back on the road. I then like to just ride them around for a bit. I might keep them for a year, 2 years, whatever, and then move them on to fund the next project. So this is my 4th or 5th project bike now. There's a couple of bikes in the background you can see there, which I've done. One clearly isn't a vintage Japanese bike, but that was a project that came to me from somebody, and I'm sure at one point I'll explain the story about how I ended up with that. But old British bikes is generally not my thing. I'll show you that one in more detail in another video, but that's a Honda CBX 550 F2. The reason I've got that one is because I had one back in the 80s. I wanted to relive going down to Devon and Cornwall and just holidaying on it. So one came up at the right price. Did a bit of work, but not a whole amount to get it back on the road. So I think that one, as far as I'm concerned, that one's a keeper, because it just brings back happy memories. And to be honest, it's a great little bike to ride. Not to everybody's taste, inboard ventilated discs, but you know, they worked for me. So, and actually, to be fair, they're great in the wet as well. Okay, let's have another look at some of these boxes. Okay, so this box contains, well, a rather large air box, headlight shell. Now this probably almost will give it away if you know your Yamahas. That goes in there. It was quite a unique bike, this, back in the day. So that perhaps gives you an idea of what it was. So I shall reveal that in a bit. The reason I got this particular bike was because it was a UK registered bike. I'm not a great fan of buying import bikes. I like the idea of it being a UK registered bike, and I quite like to buy complete bikes that haven't been messed around. So many 80s bikes in particular had rear mudguards cut down, all that sort of thing. You know, I always like to buy them ideally in stock condition. You know, I don't mind how much work there is to do to them, but it's quite difficult sometimes to source original mudguards that haven't been cut off, that type of thing, with some of these bikes. Okay, what have we got going on in here? Well, pretty much the rest of the bike, to be honest. We've got brakes, master cylinders, calipers, pads and everything look pretty good, to be honest. They need some work, but yeah, they're okay. Brakes are free, brakes work, so I'm happy with that. Front indicators, rear footrest, foot peg hangers. I think that's meant to be the same colour as the frame, so I probably ought to have sent those off with powder coating. But I have actually bought some of the right colour paint. I think it's called Yamaha Titanic Grey, which I got from RS Bike Paints. So, because I was originally going to just spray the whole frame, but then, to be honest, I didn't realise, if I'm honest, how much powder coating had come down in price since I used to do it years and years ago. But it just seems so cheap these days that it seems daft not to do it. I know not everybody's a fan of powder coating. I know a lot of people prefer to paint the frames, because powder coating tends to put quite a thick layer on things. But to be honest, I think with modern powder coating, the layer you put on it is not necessarily that thick, depending on who's doing it. So, we'll see. We'll see what it comes back like. Okay, so clearly that's going to need some work. That's our rear cylinder. I don't know if you can see that, but the paint's all gone rather. Yeah, that's all got to come off. So again, that'll all go in the blast cabinet and get sorted out and be painted. Okay, and then finally, in this box, we do have parts that I've already done or polished. So various engine cases that I've polished again. I don't want these to be a mirror finish. I just want to get them so they were sort of how they were when they came out of the factory, really. That's the idea with that. So there's a few bits and pieces in there. Hopefully you didn't see that. I'm going to cover up the badge on there so you can see what it is. So the side panels on this bike are some kind of alloy or aluminium, and it's just brushed, it's not painted. It's just the base metal, so I didn't have to send those off to be sorted out. Mirrors, original mirrors, they're a bit of a mess, to be honest. You can see all the sort of delamination along here. The backs are okay, but it's a plastic. It could be painted, sprayed. This could all be rubbed down to get all the marks out. To be honest, the jury's out on what I'm going to do with these at the moment. I may put them back on. I may try and source some new ones or better ones. I think, although it takes it away from being stock, I may actually put end bar mounted mirror on it, just because I think it's going to look better. I guess that's what people did back in the day on these anyway. So I am now going to reveal to you what the bike is, if you haven't guessed already, but I'm guessing most of you have. But it is a Yamaha SRX 600. I suppose the next logical question is, why an SRX 600? Well, it should be an easy question to answer, but like all these things, it's got a story behind it. I never had an SRX 600 when back in the day. I do remember them coming out. I do remember thinking, that's quite a bold move for a manufacturer to make in a world of UJMs, Universal Japanese Motorcycles. We were in the midst of all sorts of across the frame 4-cylinder 4-strokes, and every manufacturer seemed to be concentrating on that type of bike or 2-strokes. And suddenly this little cafe racer style single cylinder twin inlet or twin carburetor, twin inlet, twin exhaust port single came out, kickstart only, which put a lot of markets off, including America, really, but has to this day has a very strong following in Japan. Japanese love SRXs. Yeah, and I just looked at it and I thought, yeah, one day I quite like one of those. Wasn't right for me at the time. All my mates were riding around on faster, sportier machines, and you know, but yeah, I started looking around for one, spotted one on Marketplace. It was over in Wales, which is a fair way from where I live. But I thought, you know what, I'll give the guy a ring. He sent me a video of it running, low mileage, UK registered bike. Did a check on the bike, everything seemed to come back okay. So I took a punt on it, got a guy to go and pick it up for me and get it back here. It was exactly as he described it. Put my helmet on, put my boots on, put my jacket on, started it up, went for a ride, absolutely fine, no issues whatsoever. However, cosmetically, it's a bit of a mess, and so most of the work on this bike is going to be the cosmetics. So tanker got dents in it, plastics had holes drilled in them. From my god, it had holes drilled in it. I think probably for some sort of flap to extend the mudguard. It was a complete bike, or it is a complete bike. It's not been chopped around. Got a full length mudguard on the back that's not been chopped off, which is important when you're buying these things, because if you want to put it back to original, they're really hard to source some of those parts because most of them were chopped around back in the day. So the idea is to get it back to factory as much as possible, using original parts wherever possible, and I've still got some bits to do, as you've just seen, with regards to the rolling chassis. The frame should be back in a week or so. Once that's back, and I've done the other parts of the rolling chassis, like the wheels and the rest of it, we can then start to rebuilding it on the bench, and then hopefully you'll see some proper progress as the thing moves forward. So even if you don't like the idea of the SRX itself, the point about this channel is that I'm going to be showing techniques that I use when I restore bikes. I can show you things like the how a zinc plate at home in this workshop, how I polish chrome and aluminium in cases, that type of thing. I can show you some of the shot blasting techniques I use, and some of the other equipment I've got. I haven't got a massive amount of equipment. It's only a small, home workshop. But we'll go through those things, and I'll show you the sort of things you can do with the sort of equipment that I've got. Yeah, hopefully, my passion for these things will show through and rub off on some of you guys, and we'll see how it goes. So, if you like that video, please like it. Please subscribe to the channel, and there'll be more content coming along very soon. See you in the next one.